Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. This is an astrological update here for November, and this is the time of Samhain, Halloween, and Dias de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. There, of course, it's also the time of the cross quarter here, the halfway point between the equinox and the solstice, upcoming December solstice. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that and then diving into the aspects that are taking place of planetary alignments and the signs that are going to be involved in upcoming month and what to look for in the night sky as well. So there is just obviously plenty to talk about. I did a video in October about the upcoming US general election, which is really, pretty stressful for here most people in the United States, and in the middle of a pandemic and economic crisis. There's definitely a lot happening there, but there, of course, is a life after the election, and we'll see obviously what the results of that is, and then going beyond that. But this is officially the 11th episode I'm doing here. I've done a couple of special episodes, including the US election, which you can find on my YouTube channel, as well as one on the Mars in Aries, and there will be Investa in Virgo, and there will be others coming up, including one in December about kind of an outlook for all of 2021 and what that looks like. Astrologically speaking, that'll be a longer episode to cover the big stories there in astrology. So yeah, let's dive into this. But first, just doing an acknowledgement and just here now to be grateful, to be thankful for uh, all our relations, all your relations, and the collective, uh, and our ancestors, to the directions and the planets and the stars, the sun and the moon, at this great time of the cross quarter. And this was a time that was honored by the ancient Celtic, the Gaelic people, and the Northern European um, region, especially in the UK, Ireland, and Scotland, and so forth. They connected to this time because it was the time of the harvest, the final harvest, and it was the time when the dark season came. And some speculate and some think that this was the beginning of the Celtic calendar, although there are some that say that it isn't. Although most people have there's a lot of a general agreement in the uh, some of the astrological community and the pagan community that connect with that, subscribe to that particular um, start of the calendar there. And for most of those people up there, it was the time of the dark, and in particular because they were up at 50 degrees north latitude and higher. Some were just slightly below that, but for that region, we would get dark a lot faster than it would for most of the general population of the world, and for Europe and Africa and the Americas, especially if we get south of the Washington Oregon border, and south of that. So in Mexico, they celebrated the Dia de los Muertos. This is kind of a modern image of kind of a blending of the All Souls Day or All Saints Day of November 1st, which was a connection to uh, Halloween and the origin story around that. So you have all of these powerful connections. And in Mexico, that's not just in Mexico, but also celebrated in parts of the United States as well, especially in the southwestern portion. And I, certainly at one time I lived in Tucson, and they every year they would celebrate that. I don't this year with the pandemic going on was probably more a subdued celebration, but generally it was really powerful time for people to connect out and to connect to this change of the season, with the great harvest, the final harvest coming through, and the time of the dark, the time of the shadow to come in, and the welcoming of that, knowing that this is needed in order to rebirth the light, and through the solstice and into the following year. So let's take a look at what's going on in November. So we have in this episode, November highlights, November aspects. We have the Capricorn planets, the continuing saga and drama that is Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, and its aspects to Mars and Eris and even Venus in Libra, which is a topic I'm going to talk about here. And then Mars stations direct, as well as Mercury. In just a couple of days here, tomorrow and Tuesday, it's kind of in the 24-hour period where it's overlapped into from one calendar day to the next, where it stations direct, and right around the U.S. general election. So this is a kind of an unusual time for, astrologically speaking, and pretty unique. And there is definitely a lot taking place. All right, so let's look at some other things that are happening. I'll highlight some of these. We just had an unusual full moon in Taurus on Halloween. At the time of this recording, November 1st, 2020. So we just had that full moon take place with Uranus in Taurus. So this is Uranus is that wild card energy, unpredictable, unconventional novelty. And it was fully illuminated in that respect from a astrological perspective. So being prepared that we're in that zone now, that Uranus was, you might say, activated in a way with that full moon. We also have, beginning November 2nd, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter are all now coming into within 5 degrees of each other. I mentioned Mercury stationing direct in the sign of Libra. This is also an area that Venus will be in a couple of weeks, and here in mid-November. So this is squaring Saturn, and pretty remarkable that this is taking place. And then by the 7th, we have Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto within 4.5 degrees. We have some alignments with Eris, Pluto and Eris. They're going to share this for over, roughly a couple of months. They'll be within 1 degree of each other, and in a square alignment between Capricorn and Aries. Some other things happening this month: Jupiter-Pluto conjunction on November 12th, Mars stationing direct in Aries on November 13th. And by the end of the month, we have, again, this is that whole period of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto really at their greatest concentration together. So, and in the midst of that, and then we have the Sun entering Sagittarius on the 21st of November. And we have at the beginning of the eclipse season on November 30th, a lunar eclipse that is just kind of a shadow of the shadow, what they call an pulse eclipse, taking place on November 30th in the very early morning hours here in North America. And that will take place in Gemini. And these alignments, when we're looking at them, just for those people that have even some basic cursory knowledge of their astrology chart, or they've had readings where they kind of know the certain degrees, or they're practicing astrologers. This means that any of these alignments, if it kind of hits in an area where you have a personal point or planet, and what I mean by that is if your personal point or planet is the moon, the sun, the rising sign, midheaven, the lunar nodes, Venus, Mars, Mercury, or even Jupiter, Vesta, these are personal points that you can connect to if you happen to have like planets in Capricorn or Libra or Aries, for example. These are being activated in this very, very strong way, but also in Taurus and in the corresponding opposite and square signs of that: Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio. So it all depends on, this is a very active month, especially for what we call the householder signs or culture bearer signs. In traditional astrology, they would be called the cardinal signs. So, for anyone that has those, this is really, this whole year has been active in that region. So it's definitely connect with your own chart and see what is being activated there. So we have, of course, looking at the full and new moons of this month, we can see that this new moon coming up first on November 14th happens right there in the Scales constellation. This is really in the midst of uh, a a time, right in the middle of the time where Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are fully at their closest point together within about 4.5 degrees, 4 to 4.5 degrees orb. And we have this happening in the Scales constellation, which is representing a certain level of balance. And in this particular sign, again, this is a new moon in the sign of Scorpio, but in the Scales. So there is definitely a intensity around that to maybe balance out what needs to be balanced. That there is too much over on one side, perhaps, or that there is a certain the ideological balance or the desire for balance, especially with the balance around Mother Earth and around what we're desiring, what we're wanting in this life. This could be a seed point for that, and to gauge the passions of that, and to bring it into perspective for us to be an objective observer, if you will, and in being able to weigh that balance in our own personal lives, but as well as in the collective. And then we have a full moon, which is in a pulse lunar eclipse, taking place right there next to Aldebaran, the in the Bull constellation, and not far from Pleiades, which is right here, this little star here, and Aldebaran is right here. Aldebaran's the eye of the bull and one of the four royal stars, which marked at one time the four corners, the cardinal points of the directions thousands of years ago. They don't do that anymore, but eventually they're going to again, and another, oh gosh, another 1500 years or so, maybe less. I don't have the exact date on that, but that will be something to take place again. But this lunar eclipse is not something you'll just barely see a shadow if you're up in the early morning skies and you have a clear skies. You may be able to see the shadow here in North America pass over. Again, it's just a brief edge of the shadow, kind of like the edge of the shadow coming over, almost a partial eclipse, but not quite. And I've got this here. It's not far from the galactic extreme or galactic edge, which is the opposite of the Milky Way's galactic center. So it's kind of out and outside the galaxy there. And so we have these are the two the main moon phases here. Aside from the quarters, is the new and the full moon looked at right here. All right, so let's look at Mercury Stationing Direct. This is one of the main themes of November, is this connection with Spica, the star, which represents it's the grain of harvest and the priestess constellation. This is a star that currently now rises right around this time on a heliacal rise. That means it first becomes visible in the early morning hours before sunrise, right around this in the last couple of days of October and the first few days of November. And so most people will be able to experience that if they're early risers, and it will become much more visible as we get deeper into November. But this is it's a powerful marker, especially around this time where Spica marks this, and Mercury stationing direct at that time. So it's harvesting all that we've brought forth, all that we've planted in the seeds. This is a time of where we can bring up what we've created, what we want to grow for the long-term future. And so this is remarkable. Of course, this is happening right at the U.S. general election, and as there's definitely been a lot of contention and energy put towards this. So this is one where if we develop a relationship with this zone of the sky with Mercury here, and not just throwing our blame that Mercury is disrupting everything, certainly has a connection to the trickster and the Loki, Hermes type of energy, shapeshifting. But it's also to help us to gain perspective, to shift our minds, and especially in this priestess constellation, to allow us to kind of connect on the earth plane to do it. Again, this is Libra, and it's squaring Saturn at this time, and so community, a certain level of relationship development, of dialogue, of mental connection, but also having that connection involve the earth plane, involving earth and its expression through us. So we can see on the right hand side of the screen, we also see Venus. And this is something that's Venus is going to come through here in mid November. And that is, I think, a really particularly sensitive and important time as it goes through here, and also will create its own balance with the Capricorn planets and Aries planets that are currently uh, in those signs. So Mars, Eris in Aries, as well as Chiron. And then in Capricorn, we have Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And so with Venus, after Mercury comes through, this can help us connect to, I would say a different vibration that we've experienced in, say, the summertime or the very early fall. So we get a chance now to maybe have greater dialogue, greater relationship, and be able to see the perspectives of others without, reacting and creating violence. So this is Libra is kind of an antithesis to that, along with the Virgo alignments I talked about in a previous video. So we can see the sun moving into the Scales constellation, coming up here in the beginning of November. And then just below the priestess, if anyone's looking at the stars and wondering what's down there, that's where the Crow constellation is, which will become more visible as November develops here. Okay, so let's look at this, November 8th through the 21st. This is not an exact where they're 4 degrees only apart. This is where they're within about a 4 to 4.5 degree orb, this about 2-week period. And these planets here on the left-hand side, these are the ones that are squaring throughout this period on some level, along with, well, Chiron's kind of on the odd side, so I didn't list Chiron here, but Chiron's still involved, but they are squaring or opposite each other, but squaring this group of planets here during the month of November. So we see them between the Archer and the Goatfish. And this is, I would refer you back to a couple of videos I did about this alignment and the death rebirth of this, on a civilization. I'm going to be talking about how these householder or culture bearer signs are being strongly activated right now. But if you were to look in the sky, this, of course, is a night sky picture taken right around the time Jupiter and Pluto are in conjunction on the 12th. So this is like either the 12th or the 13th of November, this particular night sky. But if you're looking in the sky, they're in the south to southwestern sky, and you'll be able to see Jupiter and Saturn, and knowing that Pluto is very, very close to Jupiter at this time, and although you can't see it because it's too far away. All right, so let's take a look at this. This is why these signs are really active right now. Now, I didn't list Mercury here because it's only temporarily, it's only for a few days that Mercury actually spends in Libra the first week of November, but then it retrogrades back into, or not retrogrades, but it moves forward into the sign of Scorpio. But in Capricorn, we have 3 planets. In Aries, we have 3. And then Libra, Venus spends most of the month in the sign of Libra. So all four culture bearer signs, including the Cancer would be part of that, are activated right now. Cancer, even though there's not a quote a planet in Cancer, it's part of the dynamics of the four signs. So it's part of that alignment. In traditional astrology, this would be called the cardinal signs. So culture bear is a kind of a remake of the cult of the cardinal in order to help us understand it more. So it's not to replace it necessarily, but to help us to gain more greater insight into what these signs actually are as far as their quote modality is, how they operate. And they do this through involvement of the structure and systems of civilization itself. This includes economic, cultural, health, social, educational, and governmental systems and structures. So we're experiencing a crisis on all those levels right now, and it's meant especially because of in large part because of Pluto, the feeling of not being in control here, that this death and rebirth and the disruption of things. Saturn and Jupiter is not so much. They are simply acting about the death rebirth in a way that helps, you might say, expand our consciousness and expand our understanding and planting the seeds for future generations with all of these different systems. But Pluto operates outside of time. It operates in a way that gets us to face our fears, that gets us to face the difficulties, the toxins in our being, each of us as individuals, but also in here in the United States, but also and of course in the world, getting us to face our own shadow. And it's been interesting that the current president has been has shed a light on the shadow of the U.S. As much as I personally do not like him, I can see part of his purpose in being able to show us that, hey, we have a lot to work on, that we can't bury things under the carpet anymore, that we need to face this between especially the social justice, our health system, our educational system, and the economic system that we've built. And having a constitutional crisis, and how do we want our government? How do we vote? How do we have kids in school, and how we protect ourselves from from pandemics, and all of this is and much more is being called up now into our daily lives, affecting just about everyone in the globe here. So now I go more into this in the US election and the other videos I do, but we are in this great change, and there's a kind of a concentration that's happening here in November. But with Venus and Libra, I feel like there's another perspective entering the system, that a new energy is coming forth. So it's just fascinating to look at, and we'll see how this evolves, how this unfolds. All right, so we have Mars stationing direct on November 13th at 15 degrees, around 15 degrees Aries, right here in the center of the screen, and right between Uranus in Taurus. And let's see here. I'm sorry, I got these in the wrong placement. This is actually Neptune here, and so I had those planets, at least the listings. The planets were in the right position, just the listing of them were in the wrong position. So actually, Neptune is in Pisces there, right here, and Uranus is in Taurus right here, with Mars kind of in the center in the Fish constellation. So people that this is kind of a good segue a little bit here, in that people had a connecting with what the so-called age of Aquarius. Well, look at this. What they're referring to is the precession of the equinox. And this marker here is still in the Fish constellation. So it hasn't yet gotten into that water bear here, which is also astronomers still call Aquarius. It hasn't, and it's going to be centuries before it gets into that region. But we're we can look at this because the fish constellation is really large and takes a long time for it to migrate over the centuries over. We kind of are in that space of transition into this water bearer constellation as far as the vernal or spring equinox, March equinox is concerned. So we're right in that zone. We can also see at this time as Mars is going direct, we can see other stars that are, you might notice in the sky in over the Halloween Samhain weekend of October 31st, November 1st. The moon was in this space here. It was near Mars. It had just conjunct it and passed it over, but we can see other, more visible stars like Fomalhaut here in Pisces and Menkar in the Satis constellation. And then rising now more and more in the evening is the Bull with Pleiades and Aldebaran coming through here. So we can see all these other stars that are rising with this, and highly prominently visible, and will continue to be throughout this fall and into winter time. So Mars is still very close to its brightest time right now. It's here in the first half of November, but it will start to slowly recede. That Earth is now past it up and is now at a point where it's starting to fade a little bit. But it's, the difference in noticeability is not as noticeable to see it dimming. Most people won't notice it dim until really late November and early December, where Jupiter will begin to outshine Mars again, as it normally does, except during certain periods of Mars's orbit. So Mars stationing direct, well, this is it's literally a turning point. This is Mars at its slow concentration. It's at a point where it's near its opposition, around its opposition to Venus. And so that there's this dynamic between Libra and Aries, and the mission and purpose and the connection to what was the patriarchal mission and purpose, what the masculine was, and the Libra being coming in and being of support, but also creating dialogue and showing a bit of a greater insight into us, and including and connecting with that feminine vibration coming through. And so maybe Mars is switching direction and connecting us to being able to see a new direction for ourselves, a new way of light into our own lives and beyond. So we get a chance now to connect with that. And with Mars not far, in fact, the asteroid type body Chiron is in this zone around only about 8 or 9 degrees away. So this will also give us a chance to see our connection to the deeper wounds that we've had. I talk a lot about this in the Mars and Aries video. I definitely recommend for those that haven't watched it, or maybe refresh your insight into that. Please feel free to watch that again. But yeah, this is a really powerful setup where Mars is, I would say, much more intense during this time, because it has completely slowed to a standstill until it starts moving direct again on in the days after that. So there's more hard aspects in Aries with Mars. We have here coming up in December, we have 2 of them. We have Mars squaring Pluto on December 23rd and squaring Eris the day before on the 22nd. And then 2 of them in January. But the ones in January are when Mars is in Taurus. Yeah, in Taurus, and Saturn and Jupiter are in Aquarius. So those 2 here, January 22nd and January 13th, these are the only ones out of all this group where Mars is in the sign of Taurus and Saturn and Jupiter are in Aquarius. So we get to experience a different type of aspect of, archetypal aspect, I should say, than what we've previously had. This is going to be part of the preview coming up in the 2021 video, where I talk about the year ahead and what it really looks like. Just as a reminder too, in Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, we'll be doing its own, which I intend to be part of, a look at 2021 and what's upcoming. And some of this, of course, depends upon the results of the election, the development of this pandemic, and the economic health crisis that we're all experiencing now. So we'll be having a little bit a greater understanding, if you will, on some level when we get to December, and I record my uh, video, and the school also plays a role in that too. So these are just aspects to continue to be aware of, and what we tend to call dynamic aspects, because they're the ones that create the most motivation for change. They put pressure, they synchronize, or they illuminate, depending on square, opposition, or conjunction. And trines and sextiles tend to be more even flowing, or flowing, where it doesn't create much movement. However, it can, depending on what archetypes are in play, it can create a certain relationship that takes place that can unfold over time. So let's take a look at what else is going on here. This is one of the second part of this spica. We have in this so in the early morning sky. So Venus is a morning planet, or morning star, as some call it. We can see it here on November 16th. So really 15th, 16th, 17th, Venus will be in that zone of spica, while Venus is going to be squaring the 3 Capricorn planets, and in opposition to Eris as well. So we see that this I feel like that mid period of November, that the introduction to more Libran energy could help us connect more fully in the world. And here in the United States, perhaps with the post-election period, maybe create a way for for us to realize that we're all human here, and we could actually have some agreement on some things, and maybe even see through the illusion and connect to the hard reality of what we're all in right now. And right now we're having this another wave of the COVID-19 at the time of this recording. There are more people suffering, more people being laid off because of the economic distress that's taking place. So we're now in a place, maybe with Venus and Libra, and lending a hand in that support of, like, hey, making us aware that we are here together to connect with our community, with our family, with our friends, and beyond. And we can also see that this Spica and Arcturus, and this alignment here on November 16th, we can see that it's all on about 24 degrees Libra. Okay, so for those that have personal points anywhere from like about 19 to about 29 degrees Libra, Arcturus and Spica are 2 stars that you may consider as a personal star in your life. And so that's being activated by Venus after, in the early part of November, being activated by Mercury. So, and these stars are really connected strongly to this harvest time. And when one star rises, they're so closely aligned that when one star rises, the other one is not far behind, depending on one's location on the globe. So we get to experience that. And Arcturus sits in the Bear Driver or Ox Driver constellation called Bootes or Butes. And it sits at that base of the constellation, which looks kind of like this, strand of like a balloon, like figure in the sky, human-like figure in the sky, just here connecting to to also the harvest. I mean, the ox driver, especially a figure, is that connection to the plow, or the one that helps create the removal of the grains, or the planting of the seeds, depending on one's image and what equinox point they're looking at here. So we can see here, this is the current autumn equinox in the northern hemisphere, which would be the spring equinox in the southern hemisphere in September, the sign of Libra right here. And then we don't get to Scorpio until somewhere here where Mercury is just below, right in this zone here. So I'm just listing these other constellations for people if they're looking and see other stars. They know what those constellations are: a crow, a cup of goblet, which is had a connection to the vault of heaven, and the crow being the bird that was looking out for land, and is tied to the mythology of the flood. It has some other connections there too, but that's one of them. Other mythologies there. So yes, this time is pretty profound. So let's take a look a little bit more on this. Venus, I look at this as Venus may represent a stabilizing force and balance to the intensity of Mars and Eris and Aries and the stellium in the sign of Capricorn. Again, Libra is heavily involved in the building of relationships and community through greater understanding of the needs of others and making relationships a priority. So Venus has been in the sign of Libra since October 27th, and will move into Scorpio as of November 21st. Venus is opposite Mars officially on November 9th, but it'll be in the range of Mars for a few days before that and a few days after that. I would give it kind of like with November 9th there, and then like a 3 to 4 days on either side of that. And then between November 15th and 19th, Venus squares Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. So those are the exact squares. But again, it's kind of being in that zone while Venus is in that sign of Libra. This is Eris. I just want to acknowledge Eris's contribution here, which is also, this is the sovereign feminine, the powerful feminine coming through. It bringing with it, a level of what the patriarchy rejected as disorder and chaos and discord. So, but it was a projection, and it was the feminine reaching out and saying, I am sovereign, and I am showing you your own vulnerabilities. I am showing you what issues you need to look at, even if you exclude me from invitations to weddings and or other events. That Eris comes in with that the clever activity, ability to disrupt. It's kind of like a combination of Gemini and Scorpio and Aries wrapped up into one. I feel has a certain strength behind it that can help us connect with the dysfunction, if you will, of the patriarchy and the decay of what that means for all of us. So this Eris is representing the Amazon warrior and being able to help us realize that the strength that the feminine brings and the need to come into a greater balance with that. And certainly showing itself more strongly, I feel, when Venus is in Libra here. This is Vesta in Virgo. This is continuing on to part of what I shared earlier in another video. I'd recommend you watch that. But Vesta is spending 9 months in the sign of Virgo, and it also is lending a hand, I believe, in the balancing out of the intensity that's going on right now. And so between October 22nd and July 18th, Vesta is in Virgo, and we'll have some major connections to the lunar nodes and Neptune in beginning late this year and into 2021. So something to look forward to there. So just a reminder, if you want to learn more about Vesta, also I do have a book out that is available on Amazon by ebook and in print. But this has been great to share this with you here, looking at the November alignments. I see, just to kind of cap this off a little bit, I do see a lot of beneficial and a silver lining happening in November. Granted, I still see some growing pains taking place over these next few weeks and into early December, perhaps. But I do see something beyond ourselves, beyond what we are, and being able to see through that dark forest into something that's brighter. I do feel in 2021 we have a lot of pieces to pick up, and that there is just a lot to work on, a lot of healing that needs to happen. Uh, but I do feel we'll get there, and it's just going to take some time. Um, One thing also to remember is that in the U.S. election video that I did, I talked about Uranus, and I also talked a little bit about it at the beginning of this video, but that Uranus is this wild card. Expect the unexpected. So if we're expecting great amount of intensity and violence, and like, oh, we need to lock our doors, we need to bar our windows and never go out, perhaps with Uranus's insight it could provide a different window into that we're not able to see. And so Uranus is, I think, this providing some certain surprises. Maybe it's going to be more peaceful than we realize. I don't fully know. This is Uranian energy coming through. So, and Taurus is about, taking the pleasures and beauty of the earth, Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So it's tapping into that and appreciating, being grateful for those pleasures, and being able to receive the bounties of earth, and at this time, the bounties of earth's harvest, providing for us a life, a breath, and our own individual soul's journey here on this planet. So I just want to share all of that with you, and there will be more to come. But I am grateful and thank you for watching this, and I'm looking forward to sharing more in the future. I wish you all peace and love, and be well.